Hi, my name is Cindy, and my family is very poor. No, actually, we're not poor. We're totally broke. So, sometimes my lunch consists of a piece of stale bread and a glass of water. And our house is like a shabby barn, dangerous to live in. To be honest, even the neighbor's dog, Jack, wouldn't live in it, because only rich people live in our community. Even their dogs wear brand-name clothes and eat nothing but delicacies that we, the poor, could never even dream of. And by the way, we would have been kicked out of the house a long time ago for not paying our bills if it wasn't for my grandma, my father's mother, helping us out with money. She was paying off our debts on the house, gave us money for some groceries. She bought notebooks and textbooks for me so I could finish school. Meanwhile, I wore horrible old clothes that was hard to look at because my grandmother didn't always have enough money to buy me new clothes. Why was our life like that? Well, we used to be very rich, and my parents used to buy me anything I wanted. My dad was a successful businessman. One day, he invested his and other people's money in a risky venture. It didn't work out, and in an instant, our lives changed. Gangsters in suits came in and took all our valuables. Dad's accounts were seized. He got terribly depressed and rarely left his room. And my mom just didn't care. She never worked and wasn't going to start. Mom would hang out with her many girlfriends, borrowing their clothes and talking to them all day long. And I hardly ever saw her. In fact, I was left on my own because my parents didn't care about me or my problems. But that's just the beginning of my story, because I decided to change things, to make my family rich again and become no different from the rest of our neighbors. Do you think I succeeded? Like my video, subscribe to the channel, and get comfortable. How do you think the poor differ from the rich? Well, of course, my arrogant rich neighbor Jim obviously thinks he has blue blood running through his veins. He was born with a gold spoon in his mouth, so he's entitled to a hot car, a hot girlfriend, and a pair of sneakers worth a few $1,000s. I would like to tell him where he should shove that golden spoon, but my grandmother would have washed my tongue with soap for saying that. So, back to my question. The only thing that separates the poor from the rich is the amount of money. So, in order for my family to be rich again, I had to earn as much as I possibly could. Of course, I could come up with my own startup and become a millionaire within a few hours. However, I was never really good with computers. But I definitely could clean and cook, deliver mail, be a waitress at a cafe. I can do a lot of things. For example, I can smile beautifully. So, I easily got a job in a cafe. And then some rich neighbors offered me a job. They needed someone to come in and help them with their chores. I also handed out flyers on the street and delivered mail. And in order to achieve my dream sooner, I wrote custom texts, helped students with their homework, and a few other little side jobs. All in all, I got as many as 8 jobs. And I was so happy that I was moving towards my dream. Truth be told, I was very tired, and sometimes even fell asleep in class. Imagine, I had to present my project in front of the class. I went to the blackboard, stood behind the pulpit, leaned on it, and then I was woken up by my teacher and the laughter of my classmates. My rich neighbor Jim laughed the loudest, damn it. The teacher was terrified because it was the first time I'd fallen asleep in class. She asked me to stay after class and told me everything she thought about it. Cindy, you should focus on your studies, not on money. I understand that your family is going through a hard time, but think about your future. Besides, your grandmother cares about your grades. I haven't told her yet that you're always falling asleep in class, but I can't hide it forever. Promise me you'll get more rest. I nodded back and silently walked out of the classroom. I will keep on working and keep pursuing my goal no matter what. After all, yesterday I received my first salary, and the amount was quite impressive. I was thrilled with the money. I figured if I worked like this for 2 years, we could afford a car, fix up the house, and eat something tastier than stale bread. But I had to do something about the fatigue. So I gave myself a little more time to sleep and started taking a tasty lunch with me to school. My classmates, of course, noticed the change. I had never eaten in school before. But instead of being happy for me, they started making fun of me. Guess who was the biggest bully? Jim walked over to the table where I was eating my lunch and brazenly declared,
"Hey, beggar, where'd you get the money for your food? You probably stole it, didn't you?"
I boiled with anger, but remained silent. I pretended not to notice Jim. He didn't like that. The guy threw a sandwich at me and went back to his friends. They laughed like idiots, and I just cried and ran away. I rushed into the bathroom and ran into Sarah, a girl who lost her parents a few years ago and lived with her grandmother. She was holding a mop and a bucket. When she saw me, she lowered her eyes and tried to walk around me. I remembered that she works part-time as a janitor at our school, which means she too endures the mockery from the rich kids. I stopped her and suggested we take a walk together after class. I had half an hour before my shift started at the cafe, but Sarah unexpectedly declined. "I'm sorry, but I don't have time after school." I was surprised that she doesn't want to be friends with me because we're poor, we have common problems. But Sarah shook her head. "No, Cindy, you and I are totally different. You want to be rich, and you hate those who are above you in status. I may be poor, but I don't see what's wrong with that. Poverty is not a disease." I tried to change her mind, but Sarah walked out of the bathroom, letting me know that this conversation was over. Sarah was so wrong. Being poor is horrible. It's unbearable. And I'll prove it. I will not give myself any extra time for sleep. I'm going to keep working at the same pace. And with my paycheck, I'll buy myself some cool clothes and surprise everyone. Let Sarah see what some brand name clothes could do. I needed to set aside time for shopping right away. In between jobs, I popped into a boutique. The salespeople weren't too happy to see me, but they helped me find an incredibly beautiful dress and a pair of fancy shoes. After grabbing my purchases, I came home in a good mood. My mother met me at the door. She stopped me and looked suspiciously at the packages with brand logos. She took the bags and dumped the clothes on the table. "What are these?" she asked. "My clothes. I bought it with my money." "Where do you work? You have to study." Mom was clearly not happy. "If you drop out of school, your grandmother will stop giving us money. It may be pennies, but we have to live somewhere and eat something. Return the clothes immediately. Let that old hag see how awful our lives are. Maybe then she'll give us more." "Mom, where does Grandma get the money?" I wondered. "She is already helping us as much as she can." Mom laughed wryly. "Your precious grandmother is a really rich woman, but she thinks that your father has to earn his own money and provide for his family. But he is good for nothing. I married a rich man. I don't want to live in poverty. As soon as your grandmother dies, we'll move into her fancy house and get all of her money." Having said that, Mom slammed the door and went off to see her girlfriends again. Dad, who was sleeping upstairs, now started ranting that we were keeping him awake. Before, I would have yelled back at my father. But right now, I was in shock. Is my grandmother rich? And we have to live in poverty? I was confused, not knowing how to feel about it. But I had no time to think about it. It was time to go to work. I cleaned my neighbor's house, then I ran to the cafe where I worked as a waitress. It was all a blur. I took the tray with my order and carried it towards a noisy group of guys who didn't even bother to move over so I could set the food on the table. And when I was reaching over the table with the plate, one of the guys pushed me, and I dropped both the plate and the tray. The coffee poured over the guy's expensive phones, and the plate of spaghetti fell on one of the guy's pants. He jumped up and started yelling that I was an incompetent idiot, and that's when I recognized the guy. It was Jim. He pointed at the ruined iPhones and said, "You owe us a lot of money now, slob. I'll give you 1 week, or I'll have you thrown out of your job like a homeless mutt and you'll never work again." I cried. Where could I get that kind of money? I thought of my grandmother, but I brushed aside the idea of asking her for money. What the hell? It was my grandmother's fault that the boys were making fun of me. She watches us live in poverty. I'd rather think of something on my own than go to her. I spent the whole next day at school with these thoughts in my mind, and after class, I got stopped by creepy Jim. He sat down right on top of my books and said, "So, little beggar, have you figured out where you're going to get the money yet? Time's running out." He broke my pencil and pushed my bag off the table before he left the classroom. I felt so helpless that I cried out loud. Suddenly, my teacher came into the classroom, followed by my grandmother. I was so angry that I didn't even think about what had brought her here. "I'm so sorry, Cindy," she said. "Now I know how hard this must be for you." It turned out that my grandmother was contacted by the teachers. They told her how I was struggling with my work and asked her to help me. Why is she so calm about our situation? It turns out that it was my grandmother who gave my father the money to live on, and he didn't appreciate it and was just enjoying life. One day, my grandmother decided to teach my parents a lesson and reduced the payments. Our family quickly went bankrupt. My grandmother hoped my father would get a job, but he was acting all resentful, thinking that my mother should help him. My grandmother didn't even hope my mother would help, but she was surprised with my behavior. "I'm so proud of you, granddaughter. You weren't afraid to get a job, and I decided it was time for you to be who you rightfully are. You are moving in with me, so you don't have to work, and you can finish your education in peace." I was so glad that Grandma, like a kind fairy, showed up and solved all my problems. But before, I would become an arrogant rich girl. Now I was a different person. I gave the money back to Jim, who was very unhappy with the turnaround, but he didn't say anything. I kept my part-time job at the coffee shop and became friends with Sarah, who was a nice girl. Now that I have changed, we easily found common ground. My dad suddenly found a job too. Things were finally getting better. Guys, what do you think? Does money make a person bad or good? Write your opinion in the comments. Like the video and click the red bell button to subscribe. Bell button to subscribe.